Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Horrified Dungeons and Dragons, and our copy was provided for review, but the thoughts in this video are all our own.
Horrified is a 1 to 5 player game with the original Horrified system designed by Prospero and this game designed by Peter Lee. And this is the 5th in the series, and if you're not familiar with Horrified, you play cooperatively to try and defeat certain monsters. And for this version, as the name suggests, it's all about Dungeons and Dragons. If you're watching this, you are probably already familiar with Horrified, but just in case, we're going to do a quick how to play.
You start the game as one of 5 heroes on a quest to rid the land of monsters. On your turn, you can take up to 4 of the same or different actions. These might include moving around the map, picking up items from a location, sharing items with teammates, guiding NPC citizens to their safe locations, rolling a d20 to take a hero-specific power, and dealing with monsters. This last one will be different for each monster, but for all of them, you will first need to accomplish a specific goal, and then, once the monster's weakened, attempt to defeat it. After your turn, the monsters get a turn to flip a card, which will cause some kind of game effect and allow certain monsters to move and possibly roll dice to attack you. When monsters successfully kill citizens or damage heroes, they increase the terror track, and if that ever reaches 7, you lose. Also, if the monster deck ever runs out of cards, you lose. But if you defeat all the monsters before time runs out, you win, and the land is safe again, at least for now.
So we're going to do things a little bit differently for this particular video, and we're going to talk about the theme, the monsters, and the map instead of our usual categories. And let's start right away with the theme, because that's what makes each of these Horrifieds feel a bit different.
So Horrified Dungeons & Dragons really does lean into that theme. And the biggest way it does, and this is probably one of the biggest additions of any Horrified game since the original system, is they add a new character power, and that character power is tied to, obviously, a d20. And that works really well. So you've got 5 different classes of character. They make perfect sense. There's a fighter, a wizard, a rogue, a bard, and a cleric, and they all do kind of sort of the sort of stuff that you would expect them to, but one of the actions you can take is you roll this d20, and then they've got 6 or so different things that can happen. So something maybe that happens from 1 to 6, something that happens maybe from 7 to 12, and so on and so forth. And so that kind of raises up in like how strong that is depending on what you roll. And I really like that, and it feels really different for those different characters.
Yeah, because it was getting to a point for the more recent Horrifieds where it really felt like iterations of characters that we've seen before and powers we've seen before. So it's really smart to bring a whole new system to these characters to really make them stand out. And for Dungeons and Dragons, the character that you are really is a key component, because that's meant to influence like your style of play and how you play. So it is nice that they tried to make sure that was incorporated with that special action.
And I will say that even though you are a lot more familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, I've only played like once or twice ever, and not very much. But even though I don't know a lot about the world, I still felt like it was it checked all the boxes I would expect for the world. It was the stuff that I'd kind of anticipated would be in there, but in a really good way, and especially using that d20, both for the characters and for other parts of the game, well, for the monsters, and we'll come back to that as well, but also for the places that are on the board, for the citizens, for a whole bunch of things. It was stuff that, even though I didn't know that I knew them, as soon as I saw them, I thought, oh, I recognize that from somewhere, whether it's from the D&D movie, whether it's from playing Lords of Waterdeep. It's stuff that kind of has fallen into the collective consciousness. And I like that I was like, oh yeah, I recognize that.
Yeah, it definitely feels like you're in that world. And you mentioned the citizens, and I don't know if this is true in any of the other Horrified games, but for this one, each of those citizen cards has a short little backstory, which is very D&D, because you're like, oh, like, why do I want to protect this person? What's his deal? Although there is one that it mentions always hangs out at the pub, yet never starts nor ends there.
Yeah, he has I guess he's just not going there that day. And also the citizens, there are some, maybe I don't recognize them from D&D, maybe I recognize them from Terry Pratchett, and I don't know if they're in Terry Pratchett because he's making fun of D&D, or if they ended up, oh, not making fun of, but you know what I mean, or if they ended up in D&D because they started, I have no idea what that path is, but even some of those I was like, oh, well, that's something, like I recognize that kind of from Guards, I think. And so now I'm going to think of them, of the city guard being the guards. And so I like that too.
Also, the perk cards are like NPCs that you encounter along the way, giving you extra powers. And I like that the perk cards are a different shape card, because that's the first time. And I think across the board, like the components are solid. So onto the map, and this map is super interesting and it feels quite a bit different from all of the other maps. And part of that is it feels like there's almost these like different realms that you're exploring, and it can be really challenging to get to the different places because you have to use these teleportation circles. So sometimes you end up like in a secluded part on the board with a couple of monsters, and other times you're like way off, like far away from everything.
Yeah, and it's kind of built in kind of 4 different sections. So there's like a big city, and the cool thing with that is the dragon's not allowed in there. They put up a sign, it says no dragons, and that sign works really well. Dragons famously follow signs. And then it's got these 2 kind of little islands you can only get to through teleportation. Oh, one of them also has a tunnel into the city. And then it's got this like middle kind of no man's land that you can kind of get to through everything else, that often the characters the citizens you're trying to save end up conglomerating there and just getting gobbled by monsters. And yeah, I like this map a lot. I think it's my favorite map of any Horrified game.
Yeah, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes to get where you need to go, but I do like that it feels so different. And for some reason, we found it a little easier to know where the different spots were. So anytime I was grabbing items and I had to put those items out, we were able to, after like our first play, we kind of had the locations down. And I think that's just because it made sense thematically really easily. Like, you know that there's going to be like that alley over here and the castle and then like the tavern, and everything I felt like made a little bit more sense, that we got a handle on it pretty quickly.
The one tiny negative that I'll say is because you've got all those weird different paths and teleportation circles and tunnels and all that stuff, when you are moving the monsters to the closest hero or citizen that they're going to attack, that can be just a tiny bit trickier than it is in the other games, because there are like a lot of different routes that you could possibly get to different stuff. But that is really my only complaint I've got.
So moving on to the monsters, and there are only 4 monsters included, which is the same as the previous one, World of Monsters. And I do prefer when the 6 were included in the earlier versions. But these monsters do feel really smooth. That doesn't mean they're easy, it's just they're like not particularly fiddly.
Yeah, in some of the games, American monsters especially, and I like American monsters, so this isn't to slam on it, but American monsters had some that were really there's a lot of questions in the BGG for American monsters. This one, I don't think you're going to see almost any questions. These are really smooth, but they're interesting. Like, they all do different things, and they do different things mostly from ones we've seen in previous games. So let's just run through those.
Yeah, and I will start with the Beholder. And so the Beholder has 10 eye stalks that you have to try and chop down. So when you're on its space, you can discard an item to roll a d20. and depending on your result, you'll be able to cut off 1, 2, or 3 eye stalks. And then its special power when it rolls the exclamation sign is that it's going to do a specific attack based on a d20 roll, and it's going to attack you no matter what, even if you're not on its space.
Yeah, and it's got this card that just has a whole bunch of different attacks. And the cool thing is if you chop off the eye stalk that works with that attack, it won't do that. It'll do this kind of lesser attack. So you can get rid of the ones that are really scary. Also, the word eye stalk is super, super gross. Next up, we're going to talk about my favorite one in this game, and that is the Mimic. And so the Mimic is, it looks like a treasure chest, but it's not. There's a monster hidden inside who's trying to get you. And the cool thing about the Mimic, well, one of the cool things, also a cool thing is its sculpt. It's one of my favorite sculpts in the game. But the Mimic starts off of the map. It's on its own board. And when it would move, it just moves around in a circle. Whenever it gets to these certain spots, you pull a random item out of the bag, and then whatever color that is, everyone on your team has to have a matching color. So if it's a blue, you all have to have a blue. If you do, it comes out on the board. Now you can try and chop it. If you don't, you move the terror level 1. And that is real tough because in this game, you only have 7 spots, so that can really affect you. But even when it comes out, you have to kill it with yellow items. Those are the weakest items, so you need a bunch of those. And there's cards that might move it back to its map again. So at first it seems easy. Some games it kind of is. But some games, it's really a problem, and I really like that it kind of goes back and forth from its map to the board. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think you just like that super sneaky, like, ha, I'm not treasure. Mm-hmm. Then there's also the Displacer Beast, and for the Displacer Beast, you have to get to its space. Again, discard items. You need a lot of items in this game, and when you discard an item, then you can cover its monster map. Once 5 items have been placed on the monster map, you can then try and defeat it. And to defeat it, you have to roll a d20, but if the result of the d20 is still visible on the monster mat, then you didn't defeat it. So sometimes it can be worthwhile to put down a couple extra items.
Yeah, especially because if you miss, you have to pick up one of the items that you already placed on there. So then you're like going backwards as well. So that one, and like you said, you use a lot of items in this game. You really have to pick up items. It does give you more items, I think, than the other games, but you're really going to run through those items. The last one is the biggest one, and this is the Red Dragon. This one works a little bit like Cthulhu did in World of Monsters. So in this one, you have got 2 different sections that you've got to beat. You've got 4 different steps. You've got 2 different boards. And so for the dragon, first of all, you got to get this, I don't know what it's like the orb of dragons or something. You got to get this thing through a little maze. And so you've got to move around these pieces. But the cool thing is there are 20 different ways that this maze puzzle can be set up. So that's going to be different basically every game. And it's not like the hardest puzzle, but there's a little bit of thinking in there for sure. And then once you get that out, you've got to then get the dragon to come to its hoard where it's putting all of its gold, I assume. And then you've got to set up traps for it, and then you've got to fight it. And so there's a bunch of different steps, and it is pretty tough to beat. Like, it's not, like we said with all of these, they're smooth, they're not too tricky to understand, but they are definitely tricky to beat. We've only won like half the time in this, so this is definitely not a walk in the park.
Yeah, and the dragon one is extra tricky because you first have to be able to find those 2 specific locations that are layers. Mm-hmm. And so you may end up having to flip all 4 if you're unlucky, and because the map is so disjointed, it can take a while to get to each of the layers to flip them to then get started at trying to move the orb and kill the dragon.
Also, although we said this one only has 4 monsters, which it does, you can combine this one with World of Monsters and with Greek monsters and with Krampus if you've got the Krampus special one. And so really there are, 15 different monsters that you can smush together in this. And they should work fairly well. I'm really interested to know if I can actually play with Red Dragon and Cthulhu. I think you can, but like if we have any chance of actually beating that.
So on to final thoughts. And as you could probably tell, we really liked the theme. We thought it was really well integrated in everything really. The characters, the town people, the map, the monsters. I felt like the monsters were really streamlined. They were still challenging, but they weren't difficult to understand like functionally how they worked. and I thought the map was really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not going to mince words here. I think this is my favorite of the expansions. So I guess they're not really expansions, they're standalone games. But this is my second favorite Horrified so far. It's my favorite of all the ones that they brought out since the original. And part of that is because I do like how integrated the theme is. Even though it's not my least favorite of the themes. I'm not a big Cthulhu fan. Even though I don't have a lot of real personal connection to D&D, I think that they've done a great job of making it feel like that in a way that I am kind of drawn into something that maybe I wasn't even that into. And so I like that part of it a lot. The map is terrific. The map is just so different and interesting, and I really do like the kind of complicated routes that you can take in this. And like you said, the monsters are just super smooth, but they are definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I'm more connected with the theme because I've played more Dungeons and Dragons, and it is really well integrated. I love that the D20 has been included anywhere they can. Every single character has an opportunity to use a D20 power. Almost all of the monsters have a D20 involved in some way. And so I think that's a really core part of really changing things up, because it's still very much Horrified, still the same general system, but enough of a change that is certainly, I think, more of a change than the previous versions that have come after the original.
Yeah, and it does bring in a couple of the things, because Greek Monsters added the layers in it. World of Monsters added the idea of the two-tier monster. So it brings in both of those things, but then also another one. There are, however, just a couple of little things. So one of them is that there are 4 monsters instead of 6, but it does combine with the other games if you have the other games. The other one is that it is just that little bit more complicated to move the monsters around because you've got those more complex paths than the other games. Neither of those are deal breakers for me, but they are just tiny things to keep in mind.
Yeah, so I think really the audience for this are for people who like Horrified, would certainly still like this game, people who like Dungeons and Dragons, and if you haven't played any Horrified, I think this could be the first one that you play, because Horrified is very much an accessible, like, gateway game.
Yeah, this is not going to be like a step too far. If you haven't played the first one, you're like, well, how will I understand this? You will be totally fine. I still think Universal Monsters is still my favorite. It's gonna take a lot to really dethrone that for me, but this is a real solid alternative. And that is it. Have you played Horrified Dungeons and Dragons? What other Horrified games do you still hope exist? There's a couple big ones for me. One is 80s slasher movies. That's always going to be my number one. But then also, I would love to see Godzilla, like the whole Godzilla world and Mothra and all those different characters. That would be very cool.
Please let us know what you'd like to see in the comments. And as usual, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.